Hello and welcome to Global Review. I am Sachin Chaturvedi. We bring to you weekly analysis of key global development issues. As always, let's have a look at the headlines.
UK Parliament wants to reopen Brexit negotiations on Irish border amid economic slowdown. India partners with Sri Lanka inaugurates 13-coach passenger train, part of India's commitment for development in Sri Lanka. US keen to withdraw from Afghanistan, explores an understanding with Taliban. Crisis deepens in France, protests as violence multiplies in different regions. China's central bank announced injection of $84 billion to boost lending. Iran-Syria sign 11 agreements including strategic economic cooperation for reconstruction. US imposes sanctions on Venezuela and EU countries pressure Maduro to call for fresh elections. Felix Tshisekedi sworn in as president with first peaceful transfer of power in 60 years.
This week we celebrated our Republic Day. The chief guest at the Republic Day was the President of South Africa. We would cover this in our section Across the Globe. India-South Africa partnership is age-old. It has matured and has gone through several changes, evolutions, and of course, maturity. At this Republic Day, when we hosted the President of South Africa, many important agreements were reached. It was truly a historic visit in many senses. Let's have a look at this report.
The President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, visited India from 25th to 26th January 2019 and was the chief guest for India's 70th Republic Day, themed after the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. He is the second South African president after Nelson Mandela in 1995 to be honoured as a chief guest for India's Republic Day celebrations. President Ramaphosa delivered the first IDSA Gandhi Mandela Memorial Freedom Lecture during his visit, addressed the India-South Africa Business Forum and paid homage at the Samadhi of Mahatma Gandhi at Rajghat. During the visit, India-South Africa welcomed the signing of two MOUs between Indian Policy Research Institute, namely Research and Information System for Developing Countries, with two South African think tanks, namely the Institute for Global Dialogue and South Africa Institute for International Affairs. The aim of these MOUs is to carry forward cooperation under Track 1.5 and focus on areas of cooperation identified in the Delhi Declaration 2015. India-South Africa are strategic partners established through the Red Fort Declaration 1977 and Chavan Declaration 2006. As of today, 150 Indian companies are present in South Africa and have invested around $9 billion, creating around 20,000 jobs locally. Moreover, there are around 1.5 million people of Indian origin in South Africa. For the first time, an Africa Day was celebrated at Vibrant Gujarat 2019 in partnership with South Africa. In 2018, there were around 13 Indian high-level visits to 11 African countries. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also laid out his vision for India-Africa relations in 10 guiding principles at his speech to the Ugandan Parliament. India recently launched E-Vidya Bharti and E-Arogya Bharti initiative for tele-education and tele-health covering all of Africa. In 2019, the 10th session of India-South Africa Joint Ministerial Commission will be held in New Delhi.
There are several important issues that this visit has thrown up, both in terms of their academic analysis, as they always require, but also in terms of regional and global political geostrategic issues, which are of key significance. India and South Africa partner at various global platforms. The bilateral partnership is important, but so is our partnership in Indian Ocean Rim Association and BRICS and IDSA at G77, and of course WTO and couple of other multilateral platforms where both India and South Africa have been articulating positions for developing countries. To discuss many issues related to this, today we are very fortunate to have a very senior diplomat from South Africa, Ambassador Dr. Sooklal. He has been one of the key voices of South Africa on several multilateral platforms, but this year we had the great privilege of honoring him with our Pravasi Bharti Samman. You were there in Varanasi and was awarded this by our President of India. We are also joined in by a very eminent commentator on African affairs, Dr. Ruchita Beri. She is Senior Fellow at IDSA. So, Ambassador Sooklal, let me begin it with you. How you view this visit and how you see our bilateral partnership?
Thank you, Dr. Chaturvedi. Let me say and echo your words. It was a historic visit in many senses. Historical in the fact that the visit took place at a moment when India is celebrating the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji, and we are celebrating the 100th birth anniversary of Nelson Mandela. And as President Ramaphosa said during the visit, there can be no better partnership bilaterally than India and South Africa have, because it's based on these two major pillars, two giants, Gandhi and Mandela, that carries this relationship and has cemented the bilateral relationship between ourselves.
Dr. Ruchita Beri, as Ambassador Sooklal has reflected, and being one of the senior diplomats from South Africa, he has reflected and echoed what President Ramaphosa said during the first IDSA Gandhi Mandela Memorial Lecture. How you view this visit in terms of both its geostrategic implications, but also in terms of bilateral partnership?
I think it's a very important visit, because it's timely. The reason has been pointed out by Ambassador Sooklal, and also because India and South Africa have a shared vision of the world. We also have shared values, and we are two democracies. We want to develop the relationship further, and this is come at a very opportune time. We are looking at enhancing the relationship in a big way in terms of we are strategic partners for the last 22 years now, but we are planning to expand this relationship further for a 3-year strategic partnership. So I think this has become a very important visit. In terms of reiterating the past ties, the legacies of Mandela and Gandhi, and the fact that we are also celebrating 25 years of our diplomatic relations, and also looking at the way forward as to how we take this very important relationship forward.
That's right. Ambassador Anil Sooklal, you have been in the diplomatic service for many years now, decades almost. You have seen several prime ministers. Prime Minister Modi has brought in this sort of greater emphasis on his personal engagement, hands-on with the foreign policy related issues, which hitherto not many prime ministers have done. How you see Prime Minister Modi's interaction with President Ramaphosa and the personal warmth that appeared during his entire visit, and there were several public appearances. How you see that coming up?
Well, what struck me from the moment President Ramaphosa first met Prime Minister Modi when he came to South Africa for the BRICS summit last year was the personal chemistry between the two of them. And I think in the world of diplomacy, that is a critical factor.
Exactly.
And they naturally get on very well. They are of the same mindset and have the same drive and energy to inject new life into this relationship So I think that's what makes this whole bilateral relationship so vibrant at the present moment, because Prime Minister Modi, as you rightfully pointed out, drives the international relations agenda very hard, and President Ramaphosa likewise has this keenness to build and strengthen further this relationship. And it was his first official visit to India.
That's right.
And he kept stressing throughout how important this visit was and how important a partnership this is. And India and South Africa are critical partners, not just bilaterally, but on a whole range of multilateral platforms where we think and act like-mindedly.
Do you think, Ambassador Sooklal, possibilities of multiplying our trade volume, which is around $10 billion, but South Africa itself has attracted more investment thanks to President Ramaphosa's leadership? From 1 billion, it, as you said, has multiplied to $7 billion. How we see this dynamics getting India and South Africa in context with each other?
What came out very clearly in the discussions between Prime Minister Modi and President Ramaphosa is that we need to leverage the opportunities for mutual gain. And this relationship is underperforming at the moment on the trade and investment front. There is tremendous scope to scale up our trading relationship. 10 billion two-way trade is a very modest trade.
That's right.
And the scope to multiply that, at least double that over the next 5 years is there. Likewise, investment flows on both sides is moving in the right direction. We have about 130 Indian companies invested in South Africa, and during the visit there were announcements of some major new investments, Vedanta Resources, for example, Cipla, and likewise South African companies that are looking to the Indian market. So I think this is going to be a very vibrant area of concentrated action in the few years going forward.
And both Prime Minister Modi and President Ramaphosa have emphasized on three sectors, both in their domestic settings, where skills are coming up in a major way. They are emphasizing on cyber security and relevant issues, and of course the foreign direct investment. How you see these as complementary factors in our relative economic performances, or supplementary?
Well, I think on the skills front, India has always been a major partner for us. As you know, coming out of an apartheid historical background, we have major skills deficit, especially with the majority community. And India, through its ITEC program, has been providing a skills program for hundreds of South Africans. This is highly appreciated, and again, President Ramaphosa made an appeal. And as you know, the first Gandhi Mandela Skills Center has been established in Pretoria. It will be formally launched this year. And they're looking at very practical skills to address issues of unemployment in South Africa. So India is a very critical partner for us in capacity building and skills. Cyber security is something that is on the table uppermost because it affects all of us. And not only in the bilateral level, within BRICS, we have a working group on cybersecurity, and we cooperate there and must cooperate there. It is extremely important for us.
We would have to stop here for a break. Don't go away. We would explore more facets of India-South Africa partnership. Welcome back. In this section, we bring to you analysis which you do not find in your newspaper columns. We call this Beyond the News. And today we have picked up this very interesting issue of how emerging economies are influencing global governance. With South Africa and India being on panel today, that I thought would be the very appropriate issue. Let's have a look at this report.
Countries like India, South Africa, Brazil, China and Nigeria make up for a significant part of the global GDP. Their role in institutions like IMF, G20 and UNFCCC amongst others has increased considerably in the last 20 years. The formation of G20 as a response to the East Asian financial crisis was the first event that brought the emerging economies of today to the center of global economic governance. After the 2008 financial crisis, G20 became the largest grouping of all heads of state, with the role of emerging economies driving its path. In 2010, IMF announced its reform package, giving an increasing stake in its quota to emerging economies. In 2012, the BRICS countries contributed $75 billion to the $430 billion bailout, with India contributing $10 billion and South Africa $2 billion. However, international financial institutions continue to be dominated by developed nations. The emerging economies, particularly the BRICS, have created new institutions like the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank (AIIB) or the BRICS New Development Bank (NDB) and Currency Reserve Arrangement (CRA). India and South Africa play a pivotal role in this scenario. During President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit, India-South Africa agreed to enhance cooperation in multilateral forums on blue economy, including Indian Ocean Rim Association. India also invited South Africa to join the International Solar Alliance. India and South Africa have committed to cooperate in multilateral groupings of G20, BRICS, IDSA, BASIC, NAM, WTO and the Commonwealth. Prime Minister Modi and President Ramaphosa underlined the need for joint cooperation for global governance reforms to advance a development-centered agenda that promotes inclusive growth.
Dr. Ruchita Beri, I must start with you. Emerging economies and global governance is something that we have been exploring in different platforms, in BRICS, in G20, in IDSA. How you see India-South Africa partnership towards global governance?
I think it's a very important part of India's foreign policy. India has been looking at reforming the global governance structures across the world, that they should reflect the reality of the world today. And first of all, let's take the case of the United Nations Security Council, which has not been reformed for a very long time and is still representing.
And now South Africa is on Security
South
Council.
Africa is one of the non-permanent members of the Security Council. So both India and South Africa share this vision of reforming the Security Council, bringing in more representation from the developing world. There is no representation from Africa in the UNSC. So it's very important for India to look at UNSC reforms and seek partnership with like-minded countries like South Africa on this. Secondly, at BRICS, BRICS represents for India, the main theme of India's foreign policy has been to look for a new world order which is cooperative, which is looking at a kind of order which represents equitable order, which is, so that is what BRICS represents to India, that we are bringing a new alternate vision of how the world should be. And this forum has really served the purpose in the last 10 years of its existence. We have brought forth new institutions like the New Development Bank, and how we take the relationships of building the ties between the member states, which is India, South Africa, Brazil and China, and also as to how can they reshape the world order in a larger context. So, so I think again BRICS plays an important part. They
have an important role to play. Mr. Sooklal, let me take this question further to you in terms of how we are going to have an impact from the BRICS countries on global development architecture, as Ruchita mentioned. What kind of impact we really see? We thought of NDB as our institution, and we find that it has ended up with similar architecture as that of World Bank. So what is the seriousness with which we are trying to make an impact, which, as Ruchita very rightly said, an alternative? So alternative need not be a dissenting voice, it may be a positive which others may follow. So to what extent you see this preparedness among the countries, the emerging economies from the South, to have that kind of development perspective or vision, which is, if not different, is creating its own positive vibes all across?
Well, I think the BRICS must retain that fundamental dimension of pushing the developmental agenda. If we don't, then it detracts from the very reason why we've come together to address the fault lines on the global governance architecture. And I think that's what we have to constantly guard, that this is the agenda that we must push. And I think BRICS has an important role to play within the G20. The G20 is a unique formation. It brings together the developed and developing countries. But there is an interesting dynamic within that configuration. And amongst the emerging market economy grouping, BRICS, we meet as a group in order to strategize and see how we can find common positions to influence the debate that takes place within the G20. So I think this is where BRICS can continue to play an important role, and sticking to the fundamental reason why we came together as a grouping in order to positively impact on a new global architecture that is inclusive and more representative of the realities of the current day.
Ambassador Sooklal, this time President Ramaphosa's visit also brought out the nuances of our bilateral partnership through IDSA and BRICS. What kind of differences and similarities you see between IDSA and BRICS?
Well, I think each have a distinct identity. IDSA was born before BRICS, and there was a reason why we came together as three vibrant democracies from three continents, but wedded to the fundamental values of democracy, good governance, and human rights. And these are the basic pillars that brought us together, and also pushing a new development agenda in terms of South-South cooperation, where we floated the idea of an IDSA fund for poverty and hunger alleviation. This fund has worked extremely well. It's been recognized by the UN as a best practice model for South-South cooperation, and it has impacted on the lives of thousands of people in less developed countries. This is the fundamental nature of IDSA, which we should not lose. BRICS, on the other hand, is a more larger grouping where we are seeking to fundamentally influence the new global governance structures, because there are major powers coming and sitting together with this as a key element of what we would like to see change in terms of a new architecture.
Dr. Ruchita, I must bring you back here. As Ambassador Sooklal very rightly mentioned, they have unique sort of similarities, divergences and convergences. Let me ask you about strategic dimension of India-South Africa partnership. IPSAMAR is one in which we have been engaged. How you see this frontier evolving between India and South Africa?
I think the strategic partnership is very important in the strategic dimension, which you rightly said. IPSAMAR is the way we are cooperating in terms of maritime security, that the three countries are coming together, and we have been having periodic exercises, naval exercises in the Indian Ocean to deal with it. But the partnership talks about maritime cooperation on the other side in terms of cooperating in the ocean economy, as the South African government puts it, or the blue economy as the Indian government. We have emphasized, Prime Minister Modi has emphasized the importance of blue economy, calling the chakra as the Indian flag as a sign of blue revolution.
Right.
Similarly, in South Africa, the Operation Pakisa has re-emphasized and reiterated the importance that South Africa gives to blue economy. So in the maritime sector, this is one. Secondly, defense cooperation. India signed the first MOU on defense cooperation with South Africa in '96, and this was expanded in 2000, I think, and subsequently there has been cooperation between India and South Africa in terms of procurement. There were plans of co-development of weapon systems. This got stuck because of the problems with Denel, but now that has been resolved. So I feel that there is a lot of scope of defense cooperation between India and South Africa in future.
I'm afraid here we would have to stop for Book of the Week. And this time we have picked up this very interesting theme of Indian Ocean futures. This book brings out the details of what academic community can contribute when we are going for integration within the Indian Ocean waters. and as we know, it's now Indo-Pacific. So how we are going forward with this? And Mr. Sooklal, you were in academics before you stepped in these diplomatic shoes. How you see role of academics in IORA?
Very critical, very critical. As you know, we have the academic forum within IORA, and that is, for me, the brain trust of IORA. It's very important to have that track running parallel with the intergovernmental track, because much of what we discuss and the policies we implement, the work that the academic forum do and our academics and think tank do, helps to inform us to make better decisions. So that academic dimension of IORA must be strengthened further, and it must become a vibrant repository for us in terms of guiding the work that we do. And IORA, as you know, is at a critical phase in terms of the work it is doing and its expansion. And herein, I think we need to ensure that we work in tandem with the academic forum.
Ruchita, this book by Timothy and Graham brings out what the Journal of Indian Ocean Rim is now going to discuss in various issues that it would be bringing out. The first issue is already out, and there are efforts to have sustenance in its publication. How you see the role of, as an academic, you see the role of IORA-led publications, particularly a journal and then volumes like these?
I think it is very important. In past, IORA has initiated projects like a newsletter, but I think this is a step forward, and this comes out with the informed and well discussed and debated issues based research on how to take the IORA forward. And there are a number of issues which are discussed in the IORA. There are 6 areas of cooperation, and maritime security and defense and development are very important dimensions of it. And I hope that this would continue to be reflected in this journal.
On that positive note, we would have to stop here. Keep writing us, give us your reactions, your recommendations. We would be responding to them. Till then, a very goodbye. Thank you.